Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jasodha Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Shuddhara Srimad Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagvatam Ki Gaura Premanandi All glories to the Suman devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Dhananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyareva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam says, Canto chapter 4, text number 17. Tebhyas tasyam samabhavad Daksha prachaitasa kila Yasya praja visargena Loka apuritastraya Hare Krishna. Tebhyastasyam samabhavad Daksha prachaitasa kila Yasya praja visargena Loka apuritastraya Tebhyastasyam samabhavad Daksha prachaitasa kila Yasya praja visargena Loka apuritastraya Tebhyastasyam samabhavad Daksha prachaitasa kila Yasya praja visargena loka apuritastraya tebhya, from all the prachetas, tasyam, in her, samabhavat, was generated, daksha, the expert in begetting children, prachetasaha, the son of the prachetas, kila, indeed, yasya, of whom, praja visarghena, by the generation of living entities, loka, the worlds, apurita, filled, traya, three. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada ki Jaya. Translation: in the womb of that girl, the prachetas all begot a son named Daksha, who filled the three worlds with living entities. Purport: Daksha was first born during the reign of Swayambhuva Manu, but because of offending Lord Shiva, he was punished by having the head of a goat substituted for his own head. Thus insulted, he had to give up that body, and in the 6th Manvantara, called the Chakshusha Manvantara, he was born of the womb of Mairisha as Daksha. In this connection, Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur quotes this verse, Chakshushe Twantare Prapte Praksarge Kala Vidrute Yasa Sarja Praja Ishta Sadaksho Dhaivachoditaha. Quote, his previous body had been destroyed, but he, the same Daksha, inspired by the Supreme Will, created all the desired living entities in the Chakshusha Manvantara. End quote. Srimad Bhagvatam, 4th Canto, Chapter 30, verse 49. Thus Daksha regained his previous opulence and again begot thousands and millions of children to fill the three worlds. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Thousands and millions of children. Jai. Okay. So, and one day of Lord Brahma, is about 4,320,000,000 years. So on one day of Lord Brahma, there are 14 Manvantars. Manvantara means a lifespan of Manu. Manu is the progenitor of mankind. So in one day of Lord Brahma, there are 14 Manu lifespans. And their lifespans are very long. Each Manvantara's lifespan lasts for 71 Divya Yugas. A Divya Yuga, are you catching? I'm not good at math, so I had to review this in CC before I came downstairs. 71, a Divya Yuga is the 4 Yugas. The 4 Yugas means Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Kali Yuga. Taken together is one Divya Yuga. So that time span for one Divya Yuga is about, I think, 4,320,000 years. That's a lifespan, that's the time span of one Divya Yuga. So a lifespan of one Manu is 71 Divya Yugas. So that means 71 times 4,320,000. Anyone's got a calculator? I didn't do all the math. So that is the lifespan of one Manu. And then at the end of his lifespan, there's a partial destruction of the universe up into the Swargaloka. The higher planetary systems aren't affected so much. They're partially affected because of fire that comes from Anantasesha, who's on the bottom of the universe, destroys half the universe and up to Swargaloka. And then the higher planetary systems just above Swargaloka, like Janaloka, I think, and Maharloka is just above. They can feel the heat, so they skedaddle from Maharloka, they go up to Janaloka, I think, where they don't feel the heat so much. So there's a partial destruction of the universe at the end of the day of Lord Brahma. So the end of the day of Lord Brahma means the time period of one Manu has passed, so 71 Divya Yugas. 71 times 4,320,000 years has passed. So there's a partial destruction. And then when there's a second creation, then there comes the next creation after the night of Brahma is over, which lasts for the same time period. There's the next Manu, along with a new Indra, and then a new Manvantar avatar comes. There's a difference between the lifespan of a Manvantar and then a Manvantar avatar. Those are not the same thing. Sometimes we confuse the two. There's a lifespan of Manu, and in each Manvantar period, there's a Manvantar avatar. You got that? That's an aside point, but just in case you're interested in those little slight details. So then at the end of Brahma's day, he chills out for another time period, 4,320,000,000 years, and then he creates that half of the universe that was destroyed again, and then there's a new reign of Manu. So far, so good. Anyway, why did I say all that? So the first Manu is Swayambhuva Manu. And in that time period, Lord Shiva, Daksha was born to Swayambhuva Manu. And he has some problems with Lord Shiva. This was all described elaborately in 3 or 4 chapters in the 4th canto. And as a result of his offensive mentality to Lord Shiva, he lost his head. Metaphorically speaking, in his case, practically speaking, he lost his head, and it got replaced with a goat's head. If you commit aparad to some great personality, then you lose your head. That's the, I guess, the symbolic message. And he actually practically lost his head. It was replaced with a goat's head, and he was quite insulted by that. As you can imagine, you may be, if you lost your beautiful face that you're attached to, and it got replaced with a goat's face, you might feel slighted by that. And so he gave up that body, and then he took birth again. The same Daksha took birth again, but in the 6th Manvantar lifespan. His name was Chakshusha. And during that lifespan, that's what we're hearing about that Daksha now, where he begets all these children to populate the universe. You understand this point? So this is what's being described here in this particular purport. Let me see if I catch him. I'm called the Chakshusha. He was born in. Yeah. So so Daksha took birth from the womb of Marisha. Marisha was his mother, and his fathers were the Prachetas. So he took birth during the Chakshusha Manvantar period, and he, again, by the grace of the Supreme Lord, had the same opulence that he had in the Swayambhuva Manu period. And that particular opulence was his expertise in begetting children. Prabhupada writes it in a different way. Earlier on, he was expert at sex life, which is expected as a progenitor of the universe, as one whose service is to populate the universe. You can imagine that such personalities would be very expert at sex life. Daksha is preeminent amongst them all, and therefore his name, Daksha, which means expert at sex life. That's an opulence of the Supreme Lord, by the way. He was endowed with such an opulence, and he filled the universe with thousands and millions of children, the 3 worlds. That's what it says here, Loka Apuritasthaya. He filled the 3 worlds with thousands and millions of children. So that's Prabhupada's purport. Any questions about this? Any other point you want to? No, understand? Yes?
Were these all different species of life?
Yes.
How is that? How can we understand that?
By empowerment. You know, the material nature, as Krishna is inconceivable, the material nature is also inconceivable. And we heard that in the 5th canto when Shukadeva Goswami was about to give a description of the cosmology. He said, I'm just going to give a basic overview of the thing because actually it's inconceivable. And therefore, persons of this world are always speculating about it and changing their perspectives and so on because it's actually inconceivable. So how all these things are taking place? They're taking place by the empowerment of the Supreme Lord, who endows various living entities and the Maya potency itself with various Shaktis by which they can do these amazing things. He has more detail on that.
Were women or females from different species that they had empowerment because the mother gives the body. So they were empowered to give bodies of different species. So, we hear earlier that Garuda was born, Vasuki was born, all of them, they were given bodies because the mothers give the body to the child. So particularly Daksha and other progenitors, they're called Prajapatis. They have a specific empowerment that they create species. Lord Brahma is empowered by Lord Vishnu, who empowers the progenitors to bring out different species. That's how those bodies are created by Lord Brahma. So we need 8,400,000, and they are populated, or they're brought forth through the progenitors. That's
nice. Shravan, Prabhu wants to.
I'm a little bewildered how to understand this statement, Prabhuji. The Prajetas were doing austerities for so many years under the water. And how would they accept a woman after undergoing so many austerities?
Well, easily, huh? How they were doing austerities under the water for 10,000 years. How is it that after all that austerity, they came out and accepted a woman, a wife? And my answer is easily. One may say because of so much austerity. That's a joke, by the way. The idea is that the purpose of their austerity was actually for begetting children. So that when they were sent for performing austerity by King Barhishat, Prachina Barhi, it was for the purpose of begetting children. So that their accepting a wife was fulfilling their obligation for which they were performing the austerity. Otherwise, it's not at all surprising in ordinary circumstances. Jitendra Prabhu wants to say something. Oh, you okay?
There's a BTG article about the span of time. Do you remember that?
No.
And it shows how insignificant our little yuga is in comparison to the the whole. Do you remember that, Prabhu? Do you know which BTG that is? Like 5 years ago, or maybe even more. Another thing is, I just kind of remember hearing something that the 4 Kumaras, they didn't want to get married.
Yes.
Because I remember devotees were asked to get married, and they didn't want to get married, and that's one thing you can reject from the spiritual master. Is that true?
It is written in that way, although be advised, what is your motivation for not wanting to get married? You reject the order of the Spirit, don't get married, and then 2 years later, you get caught up in the kitchen or something like that. That would not be very good. There may be a reason why a spiritual master may give that instruction. One would have to have sufficient spiritual elevation to reject that order of guru. As in the case of the Kumars, they were actually completely self-realized souls, and they didn't want their realization to be disturbed by.
One of the things is a person may not want to get entangled, and I remember Ramapad Swami says that we're just taking the easy way out, like a sannyasi or something.
I mean, as a brahmachari, I can't argue with that, but again, there would have to be sufficient spiritual elevation for one to just flat out reject that sort of instruction. As in the case of the Kumars, they were highly elevated personalities. Like we hear in the Bhagavad Gita that there's 2 stages of yoga, the Arurukshu stage and the Aruda stage of yoga. So for the Arurukshu stage, the path of karma yoga is prescribed, selfless actions offered to the Supreme, to come to the stage of Yogaruda. And for those who are already on the stage of Yogaruda, then cessation of those activities are prescribed in order to maintain, samadhi. Yogaruda actually refers to samadhi in chapter 6 Bhagavad Gita. So then Kumars are already on that elevated stage, so cessation of such activities makes sense for them because they are already on such an elevated stage, and such activities would be a disturbance to their absorption as such. But then if you're not on such an elevated stage and you reject the order of the Guru, only to later on find yourself engaged in such activities, as Krishna will argue in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, you can either act according to my instruction, or being impelled by your nature, you will act anyway. But if you act according to my order, you'll be free from all sorts of reactions and so on. But if you act impelled by your nature, you'll be entangled. So then the spiritual master may, in certain case, be giving a certain instruction because he sees what the nature is, what direction is going anyway. And you say, I can reject this instruction. And then you do reject it, fine. But then later on, by your own nature, you get engaged in such affairs, then you may find yourself more entangled than you would have found yourself if you just followed the order of the spiritual master. So life is complicated. I guess that's the message. Life is complicated. Nidana Prabhu wanted to add something to Shravan Prabhu's question.
So when King Prachina Barishad ordered his sons, please populate, or please make arrangement for populating the universe, it's described that they realized the weight of that instruction, and so instead of just going and finding a suitable girl,
Immediately.
exactly, hey, daddy said yes, they actually went to meditate underwater and in the sea for many thousands of years. And being pleased by their austerity, Lord Shiva gives them particular prayers by which they become even more purified, such that Lord Vishnu appears to them like that, with bells and all that, and gives them the blessings that whatever they had set out to do, they'll be very successful at it. So naturally they created so many prachetas, one Mataji, they created Daksha. That means the idea is, before entering household life, what is important is proper austerity of learning to control the senses, so that when in that environment, the senses are naturally controlled, versus not learning how to control them. Then when one enters Grahasthashram, then it becomes even more difficult.
Why would we engage in the other activities after seeing the Supreme Lord? Once he attained supreme goal, seeing like how Dhruva Maharaj was lamenting for a broken glass. But he was lamenting also that I was looking for a broken glass and now... That is not when he was married.
Give me the microphone.
It's better get recorded. Dhruva Maharaj was not lamenting about broken glass when he was married. Dhruva Maharaj was lamenting about broken glass when he was a boy, after he had met Lord Vishnu. The broken glass was, he wanted a kingdom. And then when the Lord appeared to him and blessed him, he became a responsible devotee. Prahlad Maharaj got married. He sat on Narasimha's lap. Yudhishthira Maharaj and the Pandavas, Krishna was always walking around with them. They didn't abandon Draupadi. Of the 12 Mahajanas, so many are grahastha. It's not like, oh, I saw Lord Vishnu, to hell with the wife. It's not like that. It's that now that I've seen Vishnu, they understand how to live responsibly. Whether this ashram or that ashram, living responsibly, living devotionally is the operating principle. Otherwise, your statement would mean, as long as we don't see Vishnu, we're fine. Once we see Vishnu, dump the family. It's not like that. There is no example like that in Bhagavatam.
I think it's worth noting also that we heard about the 12 Mahajans in the last chapter, and out of 12, 8 of them are householders. They all have great devotion to the Supreme Lord. Only 4 of them are renunciates. That's the point. And another thing to add to the mix is that real vairagya or detachment doesn't mean being separated from the sense objects. That's one standard of it. But a higher standard, as is defined in the scriptures in many places, Detachment means even when the object of enjoyment is in front of you, there is no disturbance. So by seeing Lord Vishnu, one would expect that such persons will be renounced or detached. That's your point. So how is it that they're getting involved? But that detachment is not that they're not involved with the sense object. Detachment is even though they are involved, there's no attachment to it. That is the detachment. So someone can have a relationship with their... Just another example, this verse I was quoting the other day, Lord Brahma is praying to Krishna that for those who do not become your devotees, then their desires remain thieves, their homes remain prisons, and their affection for family remains foot shackles. Now this verse is actually a glorification of householder life. Although it seems opposite, it's actually a glorification because the context is Lord Brahma glorifying the Brajavasis. And they're all householders. There's no sannyasis in Braja as such. So they're all householders. And so he's glorifying their greatness. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur helps us to understand the context of the prayers by posing questions. How is it that they can be greater than Paramahamsas and sannyasis? Because they're householders and householders are attached. And the answer to that question is, well, so long as people don't become your devotees, then their desires are thieves, their homes are prisons, their affection for family are foot shackles. Well, this statement implies the opposite. But if they become your devotees, then those same things which are a cause of bondage become the sources of their service to Krishna. So the Brajavasis' affection for one another is Vaishnava Seva. Their desires are all desires for serving Krishna because they're now devotees. Their homes are places where that service is being conducted in an exquisite sort of way. So in that way, once a person is a devotee, there's detachment, and there is service to Krishna, and so whether they're householders or renunciates, it's all exquisite, it's all beautiful. So detachment, seeing Vishnu and gaining subsequent detachment doesn't mean a lack of involvement with the material world. That's for the Gyanis. That's for the Gyanis, is an extreme aversion towards matter. When bhakti is described, it's described as indifference. In other words, as it is suitable for service to Krishna, then it is accepted. Then Yukta Vairagya Uchite, this principle comes up. Yatarha Upayunjata, as it is suitable. So the devotees Krishna describes their consciousness as indifferent towards matter. The Gyanis are described as averse because of their extreme, that's the lower level of renunciation. And a higher level is indifference, as it is useful for service to Krishna. And the Prabhupada gives the example in Nectar Instruction of the $100 bill being found on the ground. The karmi, his idea is to enjoy it. The jnani is that it doesn't belong to me, he doesn't touch it. But the devotee, he said, oh, this belongs to someone. He picks it up and gives it back to whom he belongs. So that is a devotional detachment. It is also detached like the jnani, but it's a higher level because it is engaged in relationship to whom it belongs. So also in the family life situation and so on. Anything that has to do with brahmachari ashram, grihastha ashram, where to go, which direction to move in, always seems to get a lot of discussion. You can. I'm joking because this has just been my observation overall. Jagannath Prabhu wants to add something.
Yeah, I just want to add to the same topic what Nityananda Prabhu mentioned. The idea of the prachetas performing austerities is preparation before taking up that service. And I've heard Srila Prabhupada mention many, many times that according to the Vedic culture, it is brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyas. And one of the most essential principles of brahmacharya training is to see the property. I mean, everything is a property of Guru and Krishna. So that is a core principle. Like the Guru would send the disciples for begging alms, and when they come back, they don't say, this is mine, I got this. Everything goes to the Guru, and if the Guru invites, Prabhupada would say, if the Guru or Guru Patni invite him for a meal, the brahmachari, he takes the meal. Otherwise, they fast. So the core principle that is being taught is that everything is the property of Guru and Krishna. So that principle, if we learn in Brahmacharya, and then there is a juncture, as Jaya Jagannath is saying, well, do I remain a brahmachari or do I enter Grihastha? That is again done in consultation with the spiritual master. But that core principle that we learned, we don't just abandon it, we don't chuck it. Now that principle is applied in the Grihastha environment. So where we don't see the wife or the children as my property, but it's Guru and Krishna's property. So they are not, yehi samsparshaja bhoga, the objects of my sense enjoyment. That's one. Then coming to what Prabhu was sharing, there is one beautiful pastime in Lord Chaitanya's Leela actually. So Narahari Sarkar had an amazing disciple, Lochana Das. And it so happened that when Lochana Das was young, he was engaged to be married to a girl. By the parents made the arrangement, and they were engaged to be married. And of course, I guess everybody forgot about it. And Lochana Das, he entered, the Brahmachari ashram of Narahari Sarkar. And he was moving along, and he was very attached to his spiritual master. And then at a certain age, like 14, 15, when typically in Vedic culture, again the parents of the girl, they came knocking. Hey, I thought your son was married to our daughter. Maybe it is time, for something to be done. And by this time, Narahari Sarkar and Lochana Das, Lochana Das was very moving in that direction. And then he brought it to the attention of spiritual master. And Maharaj, Prabhupada also says, so this is something that the spiritual master cannot instruct the disciple that he should get married. Because he also saw that Lochana Das, his inclination was to remain a brahmachari, but then the spiritual master carefully considered. And because a word was given, he said, actually you go. Krishna will protect you, you go. So Lochana Das, with the intention of actually following the instruction of his spiritual master, he went to the village of the girl. And when he reached the village where the girl was residing, so as is the tradition, outside the village there is a well. And so Lochana Das, he asked, for some water, and he saw this girl, and he addressed her as Mataji. Could I get some water so I can, wash my hands and feet like that? And he didn't think about it much, and then he kept walking towards the bride's house. And then the parents, they brought her, and then she said, but this, I can't marry this girl because I addressed her as Mataji. And it was not just addressing her as Mataji just by words, but he actually saw her as that. And the girl and the parents, they understood, I don't think this is going to work, because he's actually on that platform. So they relieved him of the obligation to marry the girl. And Lochana Das came back to Narahari Sarkar's ashram, and he continued. So this is an example, of fulfilling the like you were saying, fulfilling the instruction of the spiritual master, not instruction, recommendation in this case. And Krishna protected him basically because he was sincere and everything aligned. And one other small pastime from Lord Chaitanya's Leelas, Ramananda Rai. He was such an elevated, he was Grihastha, such an elevated Vaishnava. And in Jagannath Puri, he would engage in a young, Devidasis to perform dramas and pastimes for Lord Jagannath. And Mahaprabhu would say, so he would personally be involved down to dressing them and decorating them and so on and so forth.
Massaging their naked limbs.
And like wow. And so Mahaprabhu gave an example. He was saying a sannyasi, like he said, even if I actually see a doll, in his own humility, there is a transformation, female doll, if I see, there is a transformation in me. But look at this Ramananda Rai. He's in touch. He's actually touching these young, and just nothing for him. So that's an amazing devotee. So anyway, so we should carefully understand these principles, not inappropriately understand these principles. So those are 2-3 things that I wanted to share. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
If only it could be so easy for us. Okay then. You just think of a doll, you fall down, isn't it? Any other points? Okay, next verse then. Text number 18. Yata sasarja bhutani daksho duhitre vatsalah retasa manasa chaiva tan mama vahita shrinu. Translation, Shukadeva Goswami continue, please hear from me with great attention. Avahita shrinu. How Prajapati Daksha, who was very affectionate to his daughters, created different types of living entities through his semen and through his mind. Purport, the word Duhitrir Vatsalaha indicates that all the Prajas were born from Daksha's daughters. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that apparently Daksha had no son. This doesn't mean that he begot children through his daughters, please. It means that the story is coming up. How he was very affectionate towards his daughters because his 11,000 sons ended up becoming sannyasis and renouncing everything. And we're going to hear about the story in the next few chapters. And the daughters ended up taking up the service of getting married and having children. So he filled the universe through his daughters as opposed to through his sons. So that's this indicating that this pastime is coming up. Therefore it said, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that apparently Daksha had no son. That's coming up. Pastime's coming up, chapter 5, chapter 6. Okay? Next verse. Manasai vasrajat purvam Prajapatirima prajaha Devasura manushyaadhin Nabhastalajalokhasaha. With his mind, Prajapati Daksha first created all kinds of demigods, demons, human beings, birds, beasts, aquatics, and so on. With his mind. The Prajapatis have such power. Lord Brahma also, their mental sons also, and sons that are begotten through semen. Next verse, because this doesn't have a purport. Tam abrimhitam alokya praja sargam prajapati vindya padan upavragya sachara dukshkaram tapah. But when Prajapati Daksha saw that he was not properly generating all kinds of living entities, he approached a mountain near the Vindhya mountain range, and there he executed very difficult austerities. I don't know, that's kind of contrast, I guess, with what we were just hearing about the Prachetas, how in order to take up the service nicely, they perform austerities first. And in Daksha's case, it seems like he just kind of jumped to the service, but it wasn't taking place properly, and therefore he goes back and takes to austerity. Yeah.
Ordinary personality is a very, very, very great personality. The principle is, in the case of Prachetas, in the case of Daksha, Lord Brahma, whoever, that to be able to execute one's service, one needs to perform austerities to receive Krishna's mercy, without which one cannot do anything. That's the operating principle here. That without Krishna's mercy, one cannot do anything. And for which, to access that mercy, one needs to be austere. That's
nice. Any other points? Yeah. Derek has something. And then I stopped, yes.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what austerity is in the context of bhakti.
Well, we heard about that earlier. I mean, many things could be said, but in this verse from Rishabdev, Tapo Divyam Putra Kanyena Sattvam, divine austerity for attaining devotional service. If you hear Prabhupada's classes, I think he has about 5 classes on that verse. And in those classes, he often mentions the verse Trinada Pisuni Chena Tarodi Vasa Hishtuna Amanina Manadena Kirtanaya Sadahari as the austerity to be performed in the age of Kali. Otherwise, to perfect oneself in Kali Yuga, in principle, is quite simple. Chant the holy names under the guidance of sadhus and guru. That's the principle of making advancement in Kali Yuga, quite simple. But then the obstacle comes up with our false egos and so on. So Prabhupada has often mentioned that verse as the austerity of bhakti for bhaktas like ourselves in progressing. The austerities of following the spiritual master, which could be challenging, etc. Like that. Yes. Is that the same daksha that? Yes. Yeah, earlier, that's what we heard. He offended Shiva and Swayambhuva Manu. Then it said the same daksha took birth much later in the 6th Manvantar period as in the Chakshusha Manvantar. So it's the same daksha. That's what's been mentioned here. Yes. Okay, next verse. It's 21, right? I think I'm in 21. Tatraga marshanam nama tirtam papaharam param. Suitable for just. Oh, nice. Upasprisya nu savanam tapasa toshayad dharim. Otosha calls pleasure places. Oh, Hari. Translation: near the mountain was a very holy place named Aghamarshana. Oh, okay, I get it. There, Prajapati Daksha executed ritualistic ceremonies and satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, by engaging in great austerities to please him. So that answers your question also, Bhakti Derek. What is austerity? That which is meant to please the Supreme Lord is austere. It's austere because we have a conditioned nature that says we should work for our own pleasure. And so to work for the pleasure of someone else is quite austere. In fact, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta points out that the reason we become concerned when we hear about serving others, even the Supreme Lord, is that we think, how would my own prospects and desires be fulfilled by serving others? So then this becomes austerity. Tapasa, it says here, tapasa atoshayat harim. Austerity which causes pleasure to Hari, or austerity is that which causes pleasure to Hari. That which pleases Hari may also not be pleasing to you, conditionally speaking. It's nice, the word Agamarshanam, Tirtam Agamarshanam. So the holy place was named Agamarshanam. Aga means sins, Marshanam. So this Tirta was Papa Haram Param. It was suitable for removing sinful reactions. So he went to such a Tirta and then regularly performed bathing and so on, austerity for pleasing the Supreme Lord. Nice. Any point? Next verse. Ato shit damsa guhyena Bhagavan tamadokshajam Tubhyam tad abhidhasyami Kasya tushya yatahari. Translation: my dear king, I shall fully explain to you the Hamsa Guhya prayers which were offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by Daksha, and I shall explain how the Lord was pleased with him for those prayers. Purport: it is to be understood that the Hamsagulya prayers were not composed by Daksha, but were existing in the Vedic literature. Any questions about that? Now we're going to hear about the Hamsagulya prayers. It's nice. So the method which he uses to please the Supreme Lord is a method that was already known to in antiquity. He didn't have to concoct any methodology to please the Supreme Lord. How to please the Supreme Lord is already explained. So he follows one such path, offering prayers to the Supreme Lord, Hamsagulya prayers. So now we hear about the Hamsagulya prayers. Next verse. Shri Prajapatiruvacha Nama Paraya Vitatanubhutaye Gunatraya Bhasanimitta Bandhave Adrishta Damne Gunatattva Buddhibhir Nivritta Manaya Dadhe Swayam Bhuve. We're going to read the word-to-word meaning here. Shri Prajapati Uvacha. The Prajapati Daksha said, Namaha, all respectful obeisances. Paraya, unto the transcendence. Avitata, correct. Anubhutaye, unto him whose unto him whose spiritual potency brings about realization of him. Gunatraya, of the three material modes of nature. Abhasa, of the living entities who have the appearance. Oh, I get it now. I was really trying. I get it now. Sorry, when you get an epiphany, you feel a little inspired. Nimitta, and of the material energy. Bandhave, unto the controller. Adrishta Dhamne, who is not perceived in his abode. Gunatattva Buddhibhihi, by the conditioned souls whose poor intelligence dictates that real truth is found in the manifestations of the three modes of material nature. Nivritta Manaya, who has surpassed all material measurements and calculations. Dadhe, I offer Swayambhuve, unto the Supreme Lord, who is manifest with no cause. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Prajapati Daksha said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental to the illusory energy and the physical categories it produces. He possesses the potency for unfailing knowledge and supreme willpower, Anubhutaye. And he is the controller of the living entities and the illusory energy. The conditioned souls who have accepted this material manifestation as everything cannot see him, for he is above the evidence of experimental knowledge, Nivrittamanaya. Self-evident and self-sufficient, Swayambhuve, he is not caused by any superior cause. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Purport, the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is explained herewith. So we're hearing about the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Simple. He is not perceivable by the conditioned souls, so this is understanding, who are accustomed to material vision and cannot understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead exists in his own abode, which is beyond that vision. So this is one aspect. Another, even if a materialistic person could count all the atoms in the universe, he would still be unable to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This sentence describes Nivritta Manaya, Nivrittamanaya means he can't be measured. So Prabhupada's indicating a verse from Lord Brahma's prayers, even if you could count all the atoms. See, when you see the commentaries of the other acharyas, you can see how Prabhupada has laced everything together so beautifully. You get a real appreciation. Because in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's purport, he quotes the whole verse, but Prabhupada's just given here a sentence, indicating the same idea. So even if you could count all the atoms in the universe, you cannot measure the Supreme Lord. That's what's being said. As confirmed in Brahma Samhita 534, Pantastu koti shata vatsara sampragamyo vayor atapi manaso munipungavanam sopyasti yat prapada sim nyavachintya tatve govinda adi purusham tamaham vajami. The conditioned souls may try to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead for many billions of years through their mental speculative processes, traveling at the speed of the mind or the wind, but still the absolute truth will remain inconceivable to them because a materialistic person cannot measure the length and breadth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's unlimited existence. Because he's limited, he cannot understand the unlimited. Simple point. If the absolute truth is beyond measurement, one may ask, how can one realize him? The answer is given here by the word swayambhuve. One may understand him or not, but nevertheless, he is existing in his own spiritual potency. I don't know if that would really answer the question, but you may understand him or not, but he's there. Okay, so now Daksha is offering his prayers to the Supreme Lord. And this verse is just describing the position of the Supreme Lord. So Namaha, he offers his obeisances to the Supreme Lord. It's just a nice little aside maybe. The word Namaha means the negation of false ego. And the word Ma means ego, and Na means the negation of that ego. We heard this in the Vandanam seminar that was given here a couple of years back. So Ma refers to the ego, and Na means the negation of ego. So Namaha means to offer oneself completely without any sense of independent existence, which is the problem that we have in the material world, our sense of independence. I can do it by my own power. We have a lot of faith in our own proficiency in doing things. So to say Namaha to the Supreme Lord is to acknowledge one's lack of confidence in their own proficiency, understanding that actually I have no power except for that which you, the Supreme Lord, are giving to me. So Namaha means that is described. I just came to my mind just now. So obeisances to the Supreme Lord, who is Paraya. Paraya means unto the transcendent. So he's beyond the jivas, beyond the material world, and beyond the products of the material world. And that is described. Paraya means unto the transcendence. So he is beyond the jivas of this world. He's beyond this world itself. He's beyond the objects of this world. Paraya unto that transcendence. Avitata anubhutaye. So because he is beyond this world, it is not that he is without power or potency. He exists in his own potency. Anubhutaye means a spiritual potency. And only by that spiritual potency can the entities in this world come to understand him. I'll get back to that point. Just keep that as an aside point. By that potency coming from the Supreme Lord, we have our prospect in understanding transcendence. Otherwise, it's completely impossible because he's the transcendence. He's beyond this world. Yeah. His potency is not material. Para. Okay.
He's being distinguished
yes.
as that, or he who is beyond material. So his potency is not material, just so that people don't confuse. Oh, he must be a great person, maybe
yes.
greater than all of us, maybe the greatest within the material world. But this is not even that. His potency is completely different.
Okay, yes. So take note of that point. This is an important point coming up later. So then Gunatraya Abhasa. Gunatraya means of the three material modes of nature, and Abhasa means of the living entities who have the appearance. So he's beyond the Gunatraya Abhasa. He's beyond the living entities who appear to be composed of the modes of nature. Right? In other words, we appear to be these material bodies and these material minds. Gunatraya. That's why I was saying, oh, I get it now, because I couldn't get it when I was reading it earlier. Gunatraya abhasa means he's beyond the living entities of this world who appear to be composed of the modes of material nature, as well as nimitta, he's beyond this world, of which he's the controller of both. Gunatraya abhasa and nimitta. He's the controller of both the living entities who seem like they're products of this world and of this world. He's the controller of both and he's beyond both. So not only is he beyond them, but he's also the controller of them, because one can get the idea that he's just as we often had this idea before coming to Krishna consciousness, that God and his creations have no actual relationship to each other. This is quite a prominent idea in Middle Eastern traditions, that God is kind of the creator of the world, but then he has his existence there and we have our existence here. And as a result of such an idea, the tendency is to think that the world is meant for our enjoyment. Because God has created the world, and since he has no relationship to it, it's obviously not meant for him. So who is it meant for? There's only one option left. It's meant for me to enjoy. So therefore you have statements like in the Bible, it comes, God created the world and it was good. But it doesn't elaborate on that point. So the conditioned souls, conditioned as we are, it was good for what? It's obvious. It was good for our enjoyment. So Krishna is not that he is transcendental to it, but without any connection to his potency. He is the controller of that potency. Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. This Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva philosophy is very important because it shows that God can be transcendental and at the same time involved with the material energy, and therefore it is not ours to enjoy. As we discussed in Isha Upanishad, it is his property, and the reason it is his property is because you can't take it away from him. Anything that can be taken away from you, you cannot ultimately say is yours. So you may say that my house is mine, but the government may take it away. It ultimately is theirs then. So anything that can be taken away from you, you cannot ultimately say is yours, and that includes the body, which will be taken away from us at the time of death. But with the Supreme Lord, nothing can be taken away from him because everything is intrinsically related to him. Just like you cannot separate fire from the power of heat and light, so also you cannot separate the Lord from his power, which includes the material world. So he's simultaneously transcendental to it and involved with it. And that allows us to have the philosophical understanding that everything actually either is a manifestation of God because it's a manifestation of his potency, or as we normally like to express it, everything has a relationship to the Supreme Lord and thereby should be connected to him because it actually belongs to him. Otherwise, you have these sorts of philosophical ideas which makes the Lord so separate from his power that the idea comes to mind that the power is meant for my own exploitation. In other words, they see it impersonally. So Gunatraya Abhasa Nimitta Bandhave, he is the controller of both the world and the entities who appear to be products of this world. Adrishta Damne, his form or his abode is not seen or it's not known. Adrishta Damne, why? Guna Tattva Buddhibir, because everyone's intelligence is engaged in the material nature, and therefore they cannot see or understand transcendence. This verse came to mind from Bhagavad Gita. What is the verse? What is night for the common man is a time of awakening. Yanisha Sabra Bhutanam. Yeah. And what is the time of awakening for the common man is night for the introspective sage. So Prabhupada says this verse refers to two types of intelligence, actually, because the context in which it appears is the description of the sthita pragya, the one whose intelligence is fixed, one who is fixed in samadhi. So the nature of such persons is that persons who are fixed in their intelligence and those who are not fixed, they see two different realities. Even if you bring them into the same room, they don't see the same thing by dint of their either having transcendental intelligence or not. So for example, you bring a devotee in front of the deity and you bring a non-devotee in front of the deity, they see two different things, right? Because the non-devotee doesn't have any purified intelligence, all he sees is marble. Whereas the devotee sees the Supreme Lord himself and he relates to that Supreme Lord in devotion. So Drishta Damne means that the living entities don't see the Supreme Lord because their intelligence is entrenched in the material nature, right? So it can literally mean because our consciousness is entrenched in the modes, we cannot see the Lord because it's beyond the modes. And it can also mean even if the Lord appears before us, we don't perceive him. Like in the case of Avajananti Ma Mudha. Manusham Tanumashritam Parabhavam Jagannath. So Krishna says, when I appear as a man, apparently taking the form of a man, Manum Ashritaha, people who do not know my transcendental nature deride me. So they see me also, but they deride me. They don't glorify me. Why? Because Adrishta Damne, his form is actually beyond what they can perceive. Because their intelligence is Guna Tattva Buddhi, their intelligence is lodged into the modes of nature. So even though they may see the Supreme Lord, they don't see the Supreme Lord. Because they see only the modes of material nature. So you bring them before the deity, they see only matter. They don't see anything more. So then, Nivritta Manaya Dade Swayambhuve. So Nivritta Manaya means he cannot be measured. Even if you can measure all the atoms in the world, you cannot measure the glories or the qualities of the Supreme Lord. Swayambhuve, because he's self-sufficient. We cannot even understand who God is. Just like sometimes people ask the question, God is the cause of the whole world, but who calls God? This question comes up oftentimes. But who calls God means that whoever calls God, that person would be called God. So God means Swayambhuve, he is self-sufficient. He doesn't require anything to become God. This is a great defect in the modern tendency which says that that we'll become God by some process of yoga or some process of meditation. The thing is that God never has to do anything to be God. So the very fact that you have to accept the methodology to realize your Godhood is itself evidence of your not being God. So what this verse is basically showing is that the living entity and God are distinct, and their power is distinct. The power of the living entity is very limited, and therefore it cannot stretch to understand the unlimited personality of Godhead. But, back to the first verse, Paraya Anubhutaye, with the help of Krishna's power, then you can come to understand him. So Prabhupada makes that point also. Swayambhuve. With the help of Krishna's power, you can understand him. Understand? So that's it. I wanted to just, this is a short story. I've often told this story because it's good, but I'll just read it this time so you can get the full. This is a story from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta just to describe this point about how by the Lord's power we can come to understand the Lord. And it actually becomes a theme for the next two verses, which we won't be able to get to today. The story is called Seeing the Sun in the Night. This is important. Are you listening? Everyone hearing you? This is an important story. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in his book Upakanya Upadesh, these short stories that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, this is a very good story, very important. It clarified this point about Paraya Anubhutaya. A fanciful landlord once became very anxious to see the sun in a new moon night sky. That desire is itself wrong desire, but he has such a desire. The flattering sycophants, you know what is a sycophant? Yes, man. Yes, man. That can be very flattering in the case of a disciple following the bona fide guru. But if you're not following bona fide guru, it's not very flattering. The flattering sycophants of the landlord said, quote, "When you, our Lord, desires, it must be fulfilled." So what is he desiring? In a new moon night sky. So when you, our Lord, desires, it must be fulfilled. We should set up this world such an exemplary deed so that everyone will glorify you and follow the same example. Foolish. Flattering thus, one of the sycophants brought in a huge lantern and held it up towards the sky, saying, "Look here, my Lord, can you see the sun?" What a nonsense fellow, huh? So he brings one lantern and holds it up and says, "See, can you see the sun?" This is foolishness. Then it gets more foolish. Two other sycophants then pleaded, "The sun cannot be seen in such a little amount of light from one lantern. Let us arrange for 10 crores of candle power lighting." Very intelligent, huh? Very intelligent. They're thinking this way. So even that was arranged for, as the landlord desired. Some of the scientific-minded friends of the landlord made an attempt to show the sun to the landlord with the help of powerful electric lighting arrangement. So the third tribe was there. But all such efforts made by the scientists concerned were simply in vain. Then a considerate person who was present there explained to the landlord that he could never see the sun in the night, even if all the electric lighting arrangements in the world were assembled together. it will simply be a wastage of power, money, and time. So he must wait till sunrise to see the sun. Only with the help of the sunshine can one see the sun. That is the explanation of paraya anubhutaya. Understand? You understand the connection? What is the connection? Someone say. Only with the help of the sunshine can one see the sun. That is the explanation of paraya anubhutaya. What is the explanation? Okay, close. Specify a little bit more in terms of paraya anubhutaya. What does paraya anubhutaya mean? The internal energy of Krishna, his spiritual power. So I'll read it. Only with the help of the sunshine can one see the sun. So what does it mean? Close. It's close. Yeah, around his mercy. Yes, y'all are hitting it on the nail, but just I'm.
Just like the energy of the sun allows us to see the sun.
Yes, understand? Just as the energy of the sunshine allows us to see the sun, so by the energy of Krishna, his internal energy in context, we'll be able to understand Krishna. Paraya anubhutaya refers to his spiritual energy. So by that energy, you can understand Krishna. And the reason I said your points were also correct because that energy is invested into bhakta. That's why it's called ashraya vigraha. So it is a non-different answer, but I was looking for that sort of way of visualizing it. Only with the help of the sunshine can one see the sun. The sun can never be seen with the help of any other artificial light, such as our mundane intelligence, ability to mental speculate, and so on. So the purport is short. Similarly, every attempt of the materialistic scientists, archaeologists, and other people under illusion, that was this gunatraya abhasa. Gunatraya abhasa means what? The bodies. And then their guna tattva buddhibir means what? Entrenched in modes of nature. So other people under illusion, guna tattva buddhibir. See, same points coming up. So the scientists, the archaeologists, and other people under illusion to see and realize the eternal form of the transcendental Supreme Lord, full of bliss and knowledge, with the help of so-called mundane knowledge acquired through material senses and speculative reasoning, is only self-deceiving. So the thing that you can understand these transcendental truths by your own power is self-deceiving. As the sun can never be seen in the night, even with the help of hundreds of artificial lighting arrangements, similarly, the constitutional form of Lord Sri Hari and the spiritual master and the Vaishnavas is never visible through hundreds of attempts with the help of so-called mundane knowledge acquired by the material senses of the living entities. He added a few extra items there. You notice that? What were the few extra items? Sri Hari, the spiritual master, Vaishnavas, all of them in the same category of paraya anubhutaya. You cannot understand them without their mercy. As the sun is visible only in the sunlight, realization of the truly constitutional forms of Lord Sri Hari, Guru, or the Vaishnavas will only be possible under their mercy. Understand? The spiritual master cannot be assessed through a slighted understanding. Any living being conditioned under illusionary mentality, guna tattva buddhibir, verse 3, cannot make a proper assessment of Lord Krishna, the supreme controller of illusion. We heard that. What was that? Nimitta bandhave, the supreme controller of illusion, and of the real Vaishnava who is conversant with Krishna consciousness. Such nice purport is coming, isn't it? Nice little story. So I think that explains the verse very nicely. It's self-evident. Any final points? Without the mercy of the Supreme Lord, you cannot know the Supreme Lord. Without the mercy of Guru and Vaishnava, you cannot know them either. Same. You can only speculate and commit aparad and lose your head like Daksha. Become a goat. Babaji. Babaji. Any questions, comments, concerns, final exploration of the topic? Okay then. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jaya.
Hare